Welcome to LOA Today. Walt and life coach Tom Wells here. Today is Monday, December the 11th, 2017, 8 a.m. Eastern Time. And we're off to the races with another week full of wonderful shows here on LOA Today, your daily dose of happy. And Tom, great to have you back. How was your weekend? Did you have a good one, I hope?
Yeah, I had a lot of fun and got in a lot of rest and relaxation and feel inspired for another week, ready to create and have fun.
Excellent.
Hope everybody else is too.
Yeah, right. Well, a lot of people say that Mondays are the drab days. There's songs about, how terrible Mondays are, but I think this is a good Monday because I'm feeling good. And when you feel good, all kinds of good things happen.
That's right.
I do want to urge people, we're going to be talking about something a little bit more metaphysical this week. We're going to talk about, what was the exact title you came up with, Tom? Do you remember?
Well, originally I called it Getting Tight with Source.
Getting Tight with Source, that's what it was, yeah. Which is, that's fairly metaphysical and starts touching on areas that can be a little troublesome perhaps for some people. So if we're talking about stuff in a way that doesn't really match your own beliefs, take it for what it's worth, take it with a grain of salt. Doesn't mean that the law of attraction doesn't work. It just means we have different ways of looking at stuff. But that's going to be kind of a fun thing to figure out. Just, how similar or how different do you and I think and our listeners and so forth. If listeners want to call in, we would be happy to have you call in and talk with us. Our phone number here, assuming you're able to listen to us live, is 860-264-5432. That's 860-264-5432. And, okay, we got the commercial messages out of the way, Tom. So you're the one who came up with the topic. Tell us what you had in mind for that.
Well, I find that in my own life and in working with clients as a life coach that one of the biggest things that's actually affecting every moment of our life is how do we relate to what we're doing here on the planet Earth as far as, who am I? And if I'm a soul, if I'm some kind of a spiritual essence that's occupying this human body, looking out these eyes and listening through these ears and going through all these experiences that we get from the time we're born till right now in our lives, well, if we're some kind of like spirit, if we're some kind of divine energy that doesn't have really a beginning or an end, if there's such a thing as infinite divine energy, people call it God. Maybe if you're in India, you call it Brahma or Vishnu or Shiva. And if you're it's called Yahweh, it's called the Divine Mother, it's called All That Is. And in the world of Abraham, it's called Source. And it's called All That Is. So what is this? We're talking about the infinite thing that creates the entire universe. So if there is such a thing, if there's an infinite being, an infinite knowing that creates the entire universe, and our presence on this planet is that it's expressing itself through each one of us, then wouldn't it be the most important thing in my life to get tight with that thing, to get to where I understand that how that all works? So that's why I came up with this topic, because it seems to be, if I don't have that clear, then I'm maybe sort of stumbling around here in confusion. Do you understand that?
Yeah, I think I do understand. I think for myself, I do enough just trying to connect and not worry about, the nature of what it is over there on the other side. Just staying in connection with it is my day-to-day task. But, so I guess that's what occupies most of my attention. But what is it and what's it like? I'm not sure. I mean, I know I raised a question with Wendy on, I think it was Friday afternoon. And in fact, she said, let's talk about it sometime this week. The question of what Abraham Hicks calls expansion. And I mean, on the one hand, the word expansion, you visualize a balloon, you got yourself expansion. On the other hand, there are a lot of different ways to potentially mean what that, to indicate what that word means. Boy, am I having trouble there. So, for instance, there's astrophysicists talk about the expanding universe in that from the Big Bang, everything started moving away from each other. So galaxies are farther and farther away over time from each other, and planets are farther and farther away. It's like a dispersal and sort of like a shotgun effect, so to speak. That's one kind of expansion. Another kind might be, is there an energy expansion? And what does an energy expansion mean? Does energy kind of spread out or is there an addition of energy? Does every time that we think about a thought, does that actually create new energy, or is it a matter expansion? Is it matter that's increasing in amounts, or is it just simply spreading apart? So, I mean, those are some of the things I've never been able to figure out. I thought maybe you had a take on it.
Well, I know that Abraham said that the three biggest reasons that we're alive, the reasons we come into this planet, are for joy, freedom, and growth or expansion. Mm-hmm. And they said, and of those three, we tend to focus the most on thinking about our personal growth, and we focus the least, in a sense, on what really is what they consider the most important reason we're here, and that's for joy. So joy, freedom, and expansion. So yes, I believe that expansion is totally important because that, like as Abraham said, our presence here is literally the expansion of the universe. In other words, each one of us only knows what we're experiencing through our five senses and our emotions, and that really the interplay we're having here on this planet is expanding the universe. Now, I don't fully understand that. I'm not going to pretend like I understand how are we expanding the universe, but I can certainly understand that if the only thing I'm perceiving is my own consciousness and that I'm here for joy, freedom, and expansion, then don't I want to look at that and see, well, what does that imply? And what it comes down to me is that if I am an infinite being, then there's huge implications to what I'm doing here every day. As an infinite being, if I'm here for joy, if I'm here for freedom, if I'm here for expansion, then what am I doing with my actions all day long that are allowing myself to flow with that kind of a purpose? You know, if my purpose is to be really joyful and free and expansive, am I doing that? Am I relaxing into the fact that that's all that I really need to be worried about, to be concerned about? And I don't want to be worried about it. I want to be exploring it and on the adventure of that. So that's a little bit of where this conversation is going.
Okay, so essentially you couldn't really answer my question, which tells me you aren't really sure, but you like the idea of the expansion, so we'll go with it.
Well, I totally believe it's everything. You know,
I just believe that
it's a matter of me constantly noticing that there is nothing to be concerned about other than my creative growth here, my creative expansion.
Right, but I'm trying to zero in on what the expansion means. What does it mean to expand, and what is the thing that is expanding? That's what I'm trying to understand.
Well, I think what it is it's infinite joy is what's expanding. It's like infinite playfulness,
okay.
Infinite allowing,
expansion.
infinite beauty.
Okay,
you know that's what we're part of.
Okay, so it's an increase of what we're perceiving and experiencing. I got it. Okay, so that's your view on it. Because when they talk about universal expansion, I still think about what I learned in high school, with the astrophysics that they taught and so forth, and literally bodies moving apart and that kind of thing, and that is a very specific definition of expansion. So I just wondered, does that definition apply in this case? And you're saying maybe not, maybe yes. You aren't really sure, but
no, I think it definitely applies.
You do think so?
I think everything, like let's say, they talk about, for example, like if an ecologist is really concerned about saving a specific species of snail that lives in certain ponds, right? And so they do all this stuff to protect that snail. And Abraham was saying to that snail, they want to expand. That every species is expanding its possibilities, its creative potential for existence. And to the snail, the most wonderful thing that could be happening is that it's being it's expanding out of its current existence in those ponds, and it's moving into some other life form. It's transmuting, it's transforming, and that all the things that are happening on the planet are allowing it to transform. And yet, that humans want to stop that expansion. They want to somehow control what's happening with expansion and thinking, let's leave everything just the way it is, because the way it is has been pretty good and it's worked up till now. But really, everything needs to grow. It needs to transform. And they said that's how everything got the way it is by it's constantly adapting to change. It's constantly altering its life form to become more of a beautiful thing.
Sure.
So it's like a caterpillar changing into a butterfly. I mean, some people would think that's, I mean, you could say, why, that's a terrible process. Its whole body turns into goo, but look what happens while it's in that goo form. It turns into a butterfly. That's expansion. And it's a good sign of what is happening constantly on the planet with all of us and all the species on the planet. We're all expanding into more incredible, beautiful possibilities.
So we are.
Does that make sense?
We're talking about a physical expansion as well as an emotional or a spiritual expansion. We're talking about something that actually physically happens, which is important from my perspective because one of the main teachings of the law of attraction and the law of the science of deliberate creation and so on and so forth is the idea that what we think about and what we focus on ends up manifesting in what we term reality here in the physical world. Well, that means it's got to turn physical at some point. Some sort of physicality that didn't exist before has to emerge, has to become apparent. And I was just trying to zero in. Is that really true?
I lost that last part you were saying.
Oh, I was just trying to zero in. Is that really true? The idea that this kind of physical expansion is actually part of the whole concept of expansion. And it sounds like what you're saying is, physical expansion is part of it.
I think one good way, if anybody remembers the show Star Trek.
Oh, yes.
And on the show Star Trek, they had the holodeck, I think it was called. And that's a place where they could go and by some form of magic with their technology, they could create any environment anywhere in the universe, and they could go there and have experiences. And the point of that holodeck, in my mind, as I've learned all these different things I study in quantum physics, is that the whole universe may indeed just be a hologram. And it's something that, in a sense, you could say it's our bodies and everything we're seeing and feeling and experiencing is not really existing anywhere other than in a realm of consciousness or imagination. And even though, of course, it seems really real to us, and wood is hard and rocks are hard, and these things seem like hard facts and hard realities, in the world of quantum physics, if you break it down, they break the atom down to the very smallest thing, and all it is what they call a torsion field, which is like some kind of a tornado. And when they look at what that tornado is made of, all they can tell that it's made of, it seems, is thought. This is the way I understand it anyway, as a layman, that it's the only thing that seems to exist in the universe is thought. And so to me, it's the only thing that seems to exist is consciousness. Then isn't it true that everything is being created every moment by some kind of an infinite source, some kind of an infinite consciousness? Which is why I wanted to explore this subject, that it may be the only thing that's happening is that we are source and we are creating everything. And therefore, there's just this constant journey we're on. We've been on it forever and we'll be on it forever. And it's the whole essence of that journey is expansion, freedom, and joy. That we're here to just completely rock the house and have an incredibly wonderful experience in this realm of duality where we have dark and light and joy and sorrow, pain and happiness. So that's how I think it is, that there's something really incredible going on as to who we really are and what this place really is,
It's funny because, I think I mostly agree with what you're saying. And certainly that's the way it's presented in most of the LOA literature. It's certainly the way Abraham Hicks presents it. Many other gurus say very much the same kind of thing. I guess just because I came from a very skeptical place before I, adopted and embraced the whole LOA philosophy, I still remember my science roots, right? So I keep wanting to look at it from a scientific perspective. And I think that's why I keep pounding my head against stuff, because I keep insisting on looking at it from the scientific perspective.
But see, the question is, which scientific perspective? I've been studying quantum physics now for about 4 years and got all these different layman's, books on what it is, and they're the ones that quantum physics is the field of science that says all this. So, right, that the universe is constantly expanding, but that it might indeed be nothing but a giant hologram, right?
Well, yes and no. I mean, it depends which quantum physicists you're talking about. If you're talking about quantum physicists who are also into concepts like the law of attraction, who are interested in the metaphysical side, then yes, you find almost all of them talking like this. If you're talking about quantum physicists who consider themselves to be pure scientists, then no, they reject this outright. They say this is a distortion of the original theories of quantum physics. So we got to be a little bit careful here. And I think, I'm not saying I'm going to be the person who's going to bridge the two. I don't think I'm going to even attempt that. I'm just trying to understand it from both perspectives, because I think both have valid points of view, and that's my whole purpose.
But when we look at the law of attraction, and the things that we're getting from supposedly this unseen realm of the infinite where source exists, and Abraham seems to be representing these beings that are speaking from this other realm beyond death, where they're saying that the only thing that actually exists is joy, and everything, then that's all that really matters. That's all that ultimately we're here is. Nothing serious is going on whatsoever here. I mean, it's phenomenal to think that concept,
Sure.
How most of us can't buy that, right? That nothing serious is going on here. This is a giant situational comedy. That's what they say.
Well,
this is all, say anyway. This is all about joy. That's the whole reason that you're here.
Yeah.
But it informs everything we do all day long. I was raised, like in the Catholic religion, and everything there was about, there was an Old Testament God and a New Testament God, and the Old Testament God was all about judgment and condemnation and wanting you to do everything by the book, and you get, you get brownie points if you please this God. If you do things wrong, you get punished. You literally could go burn for eternity in some horrible place if you don't do everything exactly the way God wants you to do it, because God is a stern, judgmental Father, right? And those kind of concepts have been informing our ideas about who we are for a really long time. And then along comes Abraham and these others who are in this unseen realm, and they say, there's nobody out there judging us. In fact, it's totally the opposite. There's all this love out there that's supporting us as this infinite thing, and that we are actually that ourselves. We are totally infinite beings. We are God expressing itself in human form, and the more we identify with the fact that we're that infinite thing, the better our life unfolds, and the more fun we have, and the better relationships we have, and the more money we make, and the more we get everything we want, because we realize, we're infinite beings. We can call the shots here. We are calling the shots here.
And that feels a whole lot better internally. I mean, ultimately, I think the biggest lesson I've learned over the years is that when someone teaches you something, metaphysically speaking, spiritually speaking, and it feels wrong inside, which is what the bipolar version of God felt to me, the one you described, the Old Testament versus New Testament. That bipolar version of God just absolutely made no sense to me whatsoever, and it struck me very early on, age 14, as being a complete fabrication. So I moved away from that pretty quickly. But the other side of it, this idea that, like you're describing, of us being part of that source energy, and we are the creators, and this is a place of joy and of experiencing happiness and so forth, that does appeal more. It feels more right inside to me. So that's why I tend to embrace it more. The idea that we live in a world of contrast explains a lot, but it also it helps to describe very nicely what we're doing here. The world of contrast is all about understanding and exploring the contrast so we can compare it to what's going on inside of ourselves and see how good of a match it is. And as Abraham likes to describe it, it's the emotional guidance system that tells us how good or how bad of a match it is, because if it feels good, then you know that you're in alignment. If it doesn't feel good, you're out of alignment. And out of alignment means that what you're hearing and what you're getting doesn't match up with what your other side is saying. So that's an interesting concept, and that's when when I think about that one, that makes a lot of sense to me. That feels good inside. It feels like, yes, that's right. So I guess from the
what do you feel like? What do you feel like you're aligning with when you get in alignment?
I don't have a clear answer on that. I'll call it source energy just because other people do, and it seems a better term than any of the other terms I've heard, but I really don't know what it is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, part of me says, okay, well, if it's source energy, what kind of energy are we talking about? For instance, in the physical world, we have electrical energy, we have heat energy, we have a lot of different forms of energy. Which one is it? Is it all of them?
Mm-hmm.
You know, is it
so that's more of the scientific way of looking at it.
Again, the science, because I don't think that either one is more valid than the other. I think both are informative. And so I want to know where the similarities are, where the differences are, and is there a way to reconcile the differences? That to me is because that's part of exploring the contrast.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way I see it anyway. I mean, how about you?
Well, I when I say I'm aligning with source, or I'm praying to source, or I'm listening to my inner being, I mean, I do this thing called automatic writing, where you take a piece of paper and at the top you write, that you would like certain infinite beings or infinite energy or infinite knowing to speak through your pen as you write, say, for example, or your fingers as you type on the keyboard. And so at the top of the page you write, who are the beings, who are the infinite ones, you might say, that you would like to ask for help in letting this automatic writing come through your hands. In other words, what you're going to do is you're going to suspend your logical mind, and you're going to let something speak through your pen or through your hands. It's called automatic writing. And so what I write at the top is I write the names of those beings that I actually can believe exist, you might say. And so I'll say, to creator, or to my heart. I think of my heart as there's some kind of divine knowing that I call my heart, or my soul, or I'll say to all that is, or I'll say to source, or I'll say to my inner being. And so what is it that each one of us prays to? Let's say you're in a most desperate situation. Who are you asking for help at that time? What is that you're asking for help? Is there an infinite knowing out there? I mean, when I was a little kid, it was, there's somebody in the sky somewhere out in space called God, and God generally had a white beard and was pretty old and usually white robes, and somehow sat on a throne and had the keys to this kingdom that they could either let me in or not let me in.
Guarded by a guy named Peter at the gates.
Yeah. And so, when I do this automatic writing, I'm asking something to speak through me. Like when Esther Hicks closes her eyes and moves from Esther Hicks to someone who's channeling through her a divine consciousness that we listen to, and we believe the words of that divine consciousness. What is that? What's going on? I mean, if that is such an amazing infinite being that's speaking through her, and that literally, she says, that's in every single one of us, then who are we? Aren't we then this amazing infinite being that's in touch with all knowing of the entire universe? I mean, isn't that seemingly what's going on there?
Yeah, that's certainly
so
what's
to
implied.
me, this is the biggest single question about my existence.
That's interesting. You say
Yes?
it's the single biggest question of your existence, and I can't honestly say that's the single biggest question of my existence. But it's fascinating that you say that, because it tells me that's a big portion of what you're exploring in the contrast. That this is something that's really, really big for you.
It's all I'm exploring. It's like all I care about is if I'm an infinite being, it basically trumps everything else, because it informs every situation I'm in all day long. Is like, well, if I'm approaching this as an infinite being, like for example, if I'm sick, there's this thing that Abraham says, like, you are literally God expressing in a physical body. So as you're standing in a thought or a word or an action that feels good to you as you're standing there, then you're fully open to allowing this divine energy to flow through you. And in that moment, you're all that you said you would be when you decided to come forth into this body. You are an extension of pure, infinite, positive energy. You are in your full creative power, thriving, clear-minded, joyful, filled with love. You're who you are. You're allowing that which you really are. And I find that everything that Abraham says on any subject, from relationships to illness to everything, all comes down to one thing: is, do you believe that you're an infinite being, and are you aligning up with the fact that that's informing every single moment of your life? Or are you confused, thinking that you're a finite being who is here struggling against the odds of being on this earth, and you're all involved in all the push and the pull of not believing that you're an infinite being, and not knowing that? It's more than belief; it's knowing.
Yeah, I agree. In fact, I totally agree that we are infinite beings. We are, as one phrase puts it, we are spiritual beings having a physical experience, and that we have always existed and always will existed, that death is nothing more than a transition from this realm to the non-physical realm, and so on and so forth. And do I accept that as just what is? Yeah, I do. Which is interesting for me, because I would say up till about, let's see, when was it? About 6-7 years ago, maybe even before that, somewhere around that time, shortly after I started exploring the law of attraction, I changed to this viewpoint. My old viewpoint was more agnostic. It was not that there couldn't be some sort of a God or higher being or anything like that. Not that there couldn't be some kind of infinite existence, just that I was not sure about it. I doubted it. And before that, I had to go back to I was 14 years old, when I was still under the sway of Christian teaching and believed in the old man with the scythe, or whatever you were describing earlier on.
Yeah.
but it's only in the last few years that I've been on this track of being in the belief that you're describing, this belief of us as infinite beings. And again, that's just because as I studied it and listened to what Abraham had to say, and read the literature, and checked up on the workshops and so forth, I said, this resonates. This actually makes sense. It feels right. I know early on, one of my most, not difficult, but what's the word I'm looking for? My most querying thought, perhaps, was, if you're supposed to be able to feel your connection to the source, why don't I feel it? It took me quite some time to realize that maybe I had been feeling it all along and didn't realize it.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And the reason I say that is, if we are in a world of contrast, and I certainly agree, we are definitely in a world of contrast in the physical realm. There's absolutely no doubt. The contrast is everywhere. I sometimes despair of how much contrast there is, because everybody's focusing on so much negativity. But my goal is to say, okay, I'm done with the negative. I'm going back to the positive. See ya. But in this positive negative realm that we're in, this trying to come to terms with not only that positive to negative realm, but also coming to terms with ourselves as being connected. Well, how do I feel the connection? That's the question I couldn't answer. Where does that connection come from? At one point, I finally realized that I always feel this thing, and that I always center it right around my solar plexus, around the heart. And it's been a feeling that's always there. And the reason I think that I never really thought about it as being connection to source, connection to a higher being, or whatever you want to call it, is that it doesn't have contrast. It never changes. It's always the same. It's like a light switch that's always on and never gets turned off. Well, if there's no contrast, it's very easy to miss something. I mean, one of my favorite ways to describe that is, we have black cats. We have 2 black cats. If you have a black cat out in the night against a black wall, you'll never see it.
Right.
You just can't see it. You have to have the contrast. Otherwise, there's no way to visually pick it up. And I think the same thing is going on here with the feeling inside. Yeah, there has to be some contrast in order to really notice that, oh, yeah, it's there. Without that contrast, it's like, is it there? What is that? Is that? Am I actually feeling anything there?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's like, if I was to say that my only purpose here is to feel joy, freedom, and expansion, what's the purpose of the darkness, of the dark side of things, of the struggle, of the pain, of the suffering we go through? Because I still go through it, even though I quote unquote know these things. But yet it's like Abraham said the point you want to get to is where you welcome the contrast. You welcome the fact that there is a white cat and a black cat, because you need, we need to have something that stirs the pot of our possibilities here so that we can expand. I mean, growth happens from the contrast between the dark and the light, you might say. And so that's what we do in this realm, and yet we are gods creating here. Somehow we are infinite beings, and we somehow know the game that we're involved in. We somehow know that like Abraham always talks about, when you came here, you had this great excitement and enthusiasm for coming here and knowing that it was going to be a quote-unquote challenging situation. You were going to be on the leading edge of creative growth to come here, and yet you wanted to be here because there's some kind of fun and adventure in this whole place, But it's interesting dichotomy of why would we put ourselves into pain if we're infinite beings,
Well, that's an interesting question, but I think the answer is implicit in the question, because if here is a world of contrast, well, when you go to a world of contrast, you got to assume there's going to be some pain. That's part of the contrast. Now, it isn't all just black cats and white cats. There are also orange cats, and there are gray cats, and there are kind of marbled-colored cats. There's lots of different variety. It's not just black and white, and that's pretty much true for the rest of the physical existence. That there's so much variety, and I think it's one of the reasons why we would want to come here. If there is that much variety, there's a lot to explore. There's a lot to play with. There's a lot to decide, what do I like, what do I don't like, what are my preferences, what are my non-preferences, how do I want to enjoy my experience? Because if like what you say, we're here to experience joy and happiness and love and all those things. I forget what your list was. Freedom, I think, was on yours, and I can't remember what the other one was. But the point is, if we're here to experience all of that, well, not only are we doing it knowingly, but we're here to experience it. We're here to say, yeah, let's do it all. Let's dive in. Let's go for it. And then as we're here, we decide, okay, I like doing that. I don't like that part. I enjoy doing this part. I stay away from that. That's like a big warning sign. Get out of my life. Get out of my face. That's what we do. We spend our time just basically dividing the world up into the parts that we like, the parts that we don't like, and then focus on the parts that we like, if we're actually deliberate creators, that is.
Yeah, it's very interesting that when we get in trouble, like a lot of religions, and I don't know what else, but they say, ask for help. Well, who do I ask? Well, ask God, ask Jesus, ask Buddha, ask ask the Creator. What's that about? It's like we're so there are infinite beings that are here to help us. Like there's somehow, Abraham said, they're totally focused on us. There's all of our ancestors that love us are focused on us. That Native Americans say there's animal spirits that are there to help you. Others say there's fairies there to help you. Others say there's aliens there to help you. And of course, there's some that say there's aliens there to hurt you, and there's demonic spirits there to hurt you. So there's all these things in the unseen realm that are affecting us. So there's all that too. Like I have a quote in front of me here that Abraham says is that when you're going through something, delegate it to the manager. You have this really good staff in the unseen realm that will take care of everything for you. You just have to delegate it to them and totally trust and let go. Well, what? You mean so in spite of the fact that I can tell a better feeling story and I can get a better attitude about my life going forward, I can also just ask these guys and they'll help me? You mean I can just totally delegate it to them and trust and everything will get taken care of? I think that's a whole other game changer, right? I mean, if any given day, all I have to do is sit down and meditate and connect to that infinite realm and then ask them for help and trust them throughout the entire day, then my wheels are greased. I can have a great day, right? If I know that and I experience that. I mean, what do you think of that, Walt? I mean, isn't that phenomenal that might exist?
Oh, sure. I can't honestly say that my own vision of or view of or understanding of source energy is about the beings that are on the non-physical side who are helping us in all the different ways. Mainly because I buy very heavily into what the law of attraction is, what the science of deliberate creation is, what the art of allowing is. Law of attraction being that which is like unto itself is drawn, an idea of a physical law or a real law that goes beyond physical area that describes the fact that anytime there is one thing that vibrates that has a certain level of happiness and joy or depression or whatever it is, some sort of emotional content to it, vibrates at a certain rate, it's going to attract other stuff that vibrates at a similar rate. That's the basis of the law of attraction. So starting with that as the law, and then the science of deliberate creation, that idea is the application of thought, saying, okay, since there is a law of attraction, since like attracts like, therefore the focus of thought is what gets the whole process started. Just by focusing thought, I create a vibration, and that attracts other like vibrations. Okay, so there's the second part. And then the third part, the art of allowing, which is don't doubt your own creation. Basically, if you create it, stick with it. Especially if it's something that you want, don't contradict yourself. Stay with the truth of it, and stay purely true to it at all times as well as you can, so that it will actually manifest the way you want it to. Okay, well, with those three factors in place, do I really need to depend on other beings in order to attract? Well, no, not really. Is it nice to have those other beings to call upon? Well, yeah, sure, because they can attract too. So, to me, it's not like, oh, thank God those beings are there. It's more like, oh, cool. Oh, yeah, well, of course there are other beings there, and some of them are co-creating with me. Well, that's fun. I like that. I just don't like it in terms of being a kind of a dependence thing where I'm dependent upon them. Please, I'm going to delegate this to you because I can't do this myself. That's not that's the part that doesn't work for me.
Okay. Yeah, well, I get to the point a lot of times where I really want help, and I really love the fact that there are beings that are aligning with me. I mean, Abraham says a lot, you're not alone here. And a lot of times when I've made transitions in my life into more spiritual understanding, one of the biggest things I've needed is to know that I'm not alone here, and that there's tremendous amount of help available at any moment. If there's a power that's so great that that the first law of attraction is that you ask and it is given, right? So if I'm immediately wanting, something to happen in my life, and the second I know that I want that, or I know that what I don't want, that thing is created in some kind of a quantum physics realm, you might say. It's called the vortex, according to Abraham. So, and in the vortex, the thing that seems to create that thing immediately, and somehow it's there, and then I just have to let it in. That's the third step. I just have to somehow spend the rest of my life letting in all this wonderful stuff that's in my vortex. And Abraham says you've been putting amazing things into your vortex for infinity, like forever. You've been putting these amazing things into your vortex, and you're changing them constantly by your desires and what you want. That's your expansion. And so my question always comes back to, well, if there's that thing that's that powerful that immediately creates what I want, and we call that source, and that the whole purpose of my life is to align with that source so I can receive those things, then isn't that it? And I am that source, that somehow I am that source, then to me it's like that's where I want to put my focus. I want to put my focus on the fact that if I'm source, then there is amazing power, there's amazing grace, there's amazing beauty at my fingertips. And yes, I'm aligning with that all day long, but I don't know. I find that's where the magic of it. I mean, how can Abraham say that if all you did was just appreciate, everything would unfold in your life the way you want it to unfold? There's a lot of things they say that indicate that if you just line up with your joy, if you just get happy, everything will come into your life that you want. I mean, the biggest thing I spend time with clients is helping them understand that you need to get happy right now in your life. You need to find joy right now in your life. And if you're on a joyful journey, you're happy, you're trusting that Source is going to bring you everything you need, and that you have an incredible staff taking care of everything in the unseen realm, and you let go to that and trust that, you can just have an amazing ride in your life. And that the only way you'll get to what you want is by having that amazing ride. You've got to give yourself the freedom and the permission to enjoy your life.
Yeah.
So to me, it all comes down to one thing, and that is I am becoming more and more aware that I am source, that I am this infinite thing.
Sure. And actually, I think every religion teaches that anyway. We are all they teach it differently. Perhaps most of them teach it in terms of us being created by the larger creator. But ultimately, they all agree we're part of the same fabric. We're part of the same source energy, or whatever you want to call it. And I do think that is a cool thing. Not so much the first part, but the second part, that we're all part of the same source energy. But you mentioned the importance of laughter and joy and happiness and feeling that as frequently throughout your day as you possibly can. That's one of my motivations for doing this podcast, because I figured, well, if I'm doing this podcast, the more often that I'm doing it, that's more often I'm focusing on stuff that feels good. And it turns out I was right. It does feel good. The more I do it, the better it feels. By the way, I want to take one moment for a quick commercial message. If you're loving what we're talking about here, if you're really enthralled and you're feeling good, you're getting your daily dose of happy, do us a favor and do yourself a favor, because we want more and more people to experience this. Share it on social media. Put it on your Facebook account, on your Twitter account. I'm listening to LOA today. You got to listen to this. It's a great broadcast going on, or listen to the podcast later on. But share it. Let people know, because that's how we build our audience. That's how we're getting more and more people involved in the really cool existence that we're in. That is this adventure of applying our power as source beings in a physical environment. Woohoo! It's cool stuff.
Can people call in, or
if the line's still open if people want to call in. If you're listening live, we know that 99% of our listeners to this point have all been podcast listeners, so they're listening after the fact. But if you're listening between 8 and 9 a.m. Eastern Time on Monday, December the 11th, currently 8:42, we'd love to hear from you. It's 860-264-5432. That's the number, 860-264-5432. Give a call. Have a chat with us. And if we don't hear from you, we'll just keep talking, because we're enjoying this. This is a good topic.
It's a very, to me, a kind of a stimulating topic, because it challenges me to ask questions that are big. Ask questions that are transcendent. Because I always feel like if I can transcend the confusion and the feeling of negativity that people so often feel by being a human being, that's a huge accomplishment.
It is.
Like you were saying, how many people talk about negative things. They worry about global climate change. They worry about, the political things, and worry about so much illness and disease and, malnutrition. I mean, there's so many things in the world that people get worried about. And how do we change the balance of that? If we're all infinite beings, then why are we struggling so damn much,
It's quite a thing that we live in a world of contrast, and we understand now, especially as students of the Abraham Hicks approach, we understand that we are here to differentiate between in the contrast. Here's the part that I prefer. Here's the part I don't prefer. I like this. I don't like that. I'm going to keep my attention on this. I'm going to take my attention away from that. And that distinction is so subtle compared to the distinction of, politically, I don't like what's going on, so I'm going to rail against it. Now, it sounds like it's the same thing. On the one hand, you're noticing the contrast, you're noticing what you don't like. But the difference, of course, I'm sure it's obvious to you, is that in one case, you're taking your attention off of it once you decide you don't like it anymore. In the second case, you're insisting on keeping your attention on it because it's so bad. And of course, when you do that, you attract more of it into your life. That's probably the hardest thing, I think, for a political advocate, a political activist to come to terms with, that by being an activist, they attract more of the thing they don't want into their lives. That's a tough concept.
It's the hardest thing for somebody with cancer, or somebody with a tremendous back pain, or somebody who's really concerned about global climate change because they're raising 3 children and they don't want to see their children nor them suffer an overheated world where, trees no longer get the water they need and crops can't grow where they're supposed to grow. I mean, there's so many things that we can be concerned about.
And yet
by pushing against those things and focusing on how bad they are, those
get
things
more of it.
exacerbate.
Yeah, we get more of it. You focus on the Earth warming, you get more Earth warming. Whoa, that's a heck of a concept.
Yeah. All this is a heck of a concept, you know.
It is.
I mean, I love the idea that we might be infinite beings, and you know, and I feel like we are. That's what's occupying my body. That's why my 70 trillion cells can function so well.
Oh, you counted them all.
70 trillion is a huge number of functioning cells, and they're all working together. You know.
Do you take inventory periodically to make sure you have all 70 trillion in there? I mean,
yeah, I don't know who counted those. That's a heck of a job to count that. But I imagine they did some kind of math on that.
I would hope so. Otherwise, they're probably still counting. I mean, that could take a long time.
But it's that same question: is like how do the planets spin in perfect proximity to each other? How come the sun is the perfect distance from the Earth, and was it? I heard once that if it was 300 miles further in either direction, that it would be over for the Earth. You know, it's that precise. You know, everything is dialed in the universe in an incredibly precise way, and it's so there's magic, there's beauty that is beyond description behind every single functioning aspect of the entire universe and of our bodies and of our everything. And if we sync up with that, if we align with that, you know, what's the possibilities for expansion here? You know, to me, it's like that's where the word expansion really comes in. It's like this conversation, you know, how much are we expanding by increasing our awareness of the fact that there may be an infinite being, an infinite source that we are and that we're connected to, and that is literally able to immediately create in some kind of quantum reality the money that I want, or the new house I want is already somehow created, you know, and then all I have to do is let it in.
Yeah, as we're talking about this,
that's magic.
Well, it is magic, but apparently it's also science. That's the intriguing part to me, because apparently, from what we're talking about and from what we've been taught, just the act of you and I thinking about this stuff and talking about this stuff, it's as if, in my imagination, it's as if every word that comes out of our mouth turns into a construct of some kind. And a whole bunch of these constructs are all emerging out of nothingness into somethingness. And starting to fill up space and fill up time and fill up experience. And it's amazing it doesn't get crowded. It's amazing that we don't just fill everything up, you know. But apparently everything, including the universe, expands, so that allows for it. But still, that's quite a concept, imagining that every single thought, every single word coming out of our mouths is creating something. Wow. Like, I'm overwhelmed.
And that there's a default somehow to joy. I mean, like Abraham said, if you hold your cork under the water, if you hold a cork underwater, eventually let it go, it bobs back up. And they said that's the same way of our nature as human beings, is that we might think we're bummed out and depressed and sad and angry, but if once we let go and trust the way life is created, we'll bounce back up into our joy. We'll bounce back up into our happiness and our good feelings. You know, well, oh really? It's designed that way? That's pretty amazing. You know, that somehow this whole thing is designed to work. You know, in spite of the fact that we're going through this thing we call global climate change, somehow the planet is a living entity, a living consciousness that's designed to realign itself with this wonderful energy that we call Source or God or all that is, and that everything is fine. Everything's going to be fine somehow. Well, maybe not in my lifetime. I don't know what's going to happen, you know. Are we going to run out of food? Or are we going to run out of water? I don't know.
I think we're actually seeing signs of it now.
It's all okay.
I think we're seeing signs of it right now, because it's always difficult because you're dealing with the polemics of it. You know, the people who are advocates of and believe in climate change, and the so-called deniers, and the scientists are caught in the middle and so forth. So you have to kind of push all that stuff aside. But if you do, I mean, every time that I don't pay a whole lot of attention, to be honest. I've tried to take my attention away from it. But to those times when I have paid attention to the whole climate change thing, I notice that every time the the global warming folks say such and such is happening. Here's another example of it. Shortly afterward, another scientist says, "Oh, look what happened. The Earth compensated. It did this." It's like, okay, so what happened to the first part? It's like watching this ping pong match. Like, what's going on here? But I think it's happening all the time. I don't think we have to wait, lifetimes for it to happen. I think it's happening right now.
That everything is aligning with source?
Well, I'm not sure that it's all aligning with source, because it's actually us as beings that align or disalign with source rather than physical objects. Physical stuff is more like the expression of us, right? That's what we're
well, actually,
here.
Abraham said everything is, every blade of grass, every cell, every molecule, every atom is aligning with source. There is no other way for anything to exist except in alignment with this eternal energy, this infinite energy.
I didn't explain it right. What I mean is, blades of grass don't fall out of alignment. That's what I'm trying to say.
Oh,
it's human beings that fall out of alignment because we're exploring the contrast.
Right. Yeah, apparently we're the only ones that get confused.
Which is part of the experience.
I mean, that's somehow we've created it that way. Somehow it's been created in such a way that human beings come here and they create this contrast, this idea that we're out of alignment so that we can get back in alignment.
Right. But you're right. I mean, everything else stays in alignment at all times. And I think because of that, there is, there's a lot to feel good about. So we don't have to focus on the end of the world. And every time that we do, there's always some counterforce that says, well, end of the world maybe not yet coming.
Right. Or it may not be what you think it is. Just like death. It's like we could worry about death, but then, like Abraham said, and maybe Jesus was even here to show us that death is not what you think it is. Death, there's a resurrection connected to, as Jesus said, to the Father eternally, and the Father is this eternal life. In my thinking, the Father would be source. Whatever this thing is that is all knowing, all loving, all powerful, that can totally, make everything what it is. It makes everything what it is. Some call it all that is. Some call it the great mystery. It's like, what is the universe? And we are these conscious perceivers, these conscious experiencers of what is the universe. And to me, it's always a question of that, coming from that perspective, first and foremost, is the way that I try to live my life. Well, and sometimes I'm just down in the trenches, just totally confused.
So I'll tell you what, we're like 7 or 8 minutes left in the show. Let's focus in. We've talked a lot about what our viewpoints are, how we tend to look at God, source energy, higher beings, whatever it might be, how we understand the interaction between that source energy and the physical world and the non-physical and so forth. We've explored a lot of that. You were mentioning on numerous occasions throughout the conversation how you're so fascinated by this question of our connection to whatever it was. And I'm curious to know, after having focused on it for quite some time, and I'm sure it's been a lifelong experience, far beyond what we're doing here in this one program, what conclusions have you drawn? Have you been able to put anything together and turn it into, this informs me of something? What's the information you've gathered?
Well, it's sort of, I've been expressing it this whole call, and that's, a lot of the information I've gathered, I've been expressing. And I guess if to try to sum it up, I would say I'm into experiencing the fact that I am an infinite being, and and that I'm connected to tremendous help in an unseen realm from my ancestors, from animal spirits, from my source self, anything that I would call my soul, my heart, and whatever it is that is the thing that is creating this entire play that we call the universe, that scientists are studying constantly. I mean, all I can say is that all of that is, all of me is the only thing that I'm focusing on. I don't know what else I can say. That's all I know is when I sit down and meditate every day, I do everything I can to let go to that and to be informed by that. And then when I pray, when I start out each day, I set my intentions for the day. I'm asking all that is to totally possess me. It's who I am, and let it inform me throughout my entire day. Whenever I get into any kind of a quandary or any kind of a fear or any kind of an anxiety or any kind of a joy or any kind of a passion or any kind of an enthusiasm, I look at it all as this is my infinite self, learning to express itself more and more fully. So every day is an expansion of that infinite self. And that's what I'm here doing. I'm just here to expand everything about my infinite potential, which is why I love these conversations on this podcast. Gives me a chance to play the game of talking about it,
Sure.
and seeing where you go with it as another infinite being who's talking to me. Where does it spark in you? So I'm always trying to spark the infinite in other human beings,
I guess in my own case, I think of it in terms of, what am I getting out of all this? I think the biggest thing I've gotten is I want to have fun. I want to be happy. I want to be joyful, and I want to do it all the time. And so that's where I've been focusing my attention for really the 5 years that I've been doing the podcast, and probably even a little bit before that. Because as I've said numerous times, I enjoy doing the podcast. It's so much fun. I get a high out of it, and I want to feel that more. I want to feel it throughout the rest of my day too. But because I know I can get a high doing it this way, that's one reason I expanded it from weekly to daily, so I can get the high more often. So it definitely pays off. But even when I'm not doing a podcast, I am more and more focused on just finding all the different ways to be happy, grateful, loving, feeling good in every way possible. And the interesting thing that happens along the way is I find that my interest in the negative stuff is a lot less than it was. I used to be really heavily focused on a lot of it, particularly the political and news side, and I'm a lot less focused than I was before. Whereas now I'm a lot more focused on all the feel-good stuff. It's gotten to the point where my wife and I can hardly watch movies or anything like that together, television, because so much of it loses my interest because it's all got this negative focus to it. And, after a few minutes of that, it's like, okay, what's next? Come on. I just don't have any tolerance for it anymore. I want more in the positive realm. So that's what I do.
And there is some beauty in the other stuff. Like that all the contrast that we create here and that we've created in our lives is for a reason. We, like Abraham said, you don't throw and yet, sometimes we don't want to keep throwing that contrast on our path. We want to continue to expand and evolve. But there's a lot to be learned from all of it, I think.
Oh, I agree. I just don't think.
But I don't go out looking for it.
Yeah, we don't need to be inundated by it. That's the thing that our society does. Our society inundates us with it, and we don't need to be inundated. I mean, contrast. You only need some contrast in order to see the difference between light and dark. In order to see where the light is, you don't have to have darkness thrust into your face and say, "Where's the light? Where's the light?" No, it's not that. It doesn't need to be that dramatic. So, yeah, that's basically where I come from on this.
Cool.
Before we leave, because we're almost done, I want to remind people, if you have not yet subscribed to the podcast, please do so. That's how we're building our numbers, as well as through sharing with other people in social media. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, whatever it might be. Share your experience. Tell them that you're enjoying the show and get other people to give it a try, see if they like it too. But also subscribe to the podcast through loatoday.net. That's the easy way. There's a subscribe button on virtually every page there. You can also do it through your smartphone. If you have an iPhone, just go to the iTunes store or just go to the podcast software that's built in either place and just do a search on LOA Today. If you're on an Android phone, same thing. Just go to Google Play and type in LOA Today, and sure enough, we'll pop right up so you can subscribe, and that way you won't miss anything, which is what the whole purpose is, because that way you keep coming back, we keep building our audience, and we keep spreading the message further and further. And Tom, before we leave, how do they reach you if they're interested in perhaps a private consultation?
Yeah, you can contact me through my website, which is youarejoy.com, and that's youarejoy.com. Every session that you can fill out a simple form, and I will contact you back and you can have an hour of free coaching with me, and you can decide if you want to do more after that or not. That's how you can contact me.
Sounds good, and I'm looking forward to contacting you again next Friday and carrying on more of these conversations, Tom.
Yeah, I am too. This is exciting to talk about all this stuff.
And we hope we'll
Thank
see
you,
you
Walt.
all not only Friday, but tomorrow here and later on today at 4 p.m. here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.